So today I was about to do the news of the week video, and I was about to talk about how once again we had numerous reports of what's going to happen once this tournament is over and that what MLS is going to do to restart the regular season. Only this time I was going to mention how the most credible site in MLS besides the league website, that is The Athletic, has report that the season could actually restart in late August and that the first match after the tournament could come as soon as the day after the tournament final is going to be over between FC Dallas and Nashville. And guess what happened this morning? I woke up, look at my phone, and there it is. There is the official announcement of what MLS is going to do once the tournament is going to be over and how the regular season is going to restart. And without further ado, let's us read in terms of this article. Major League Soccer revealed the schedule for the first phase of the return of the 25th season in home market. So it seemed like MLS is going with the same route that the USL and the MLB is going to go. And before, I know there's going to be people that say, well, this is clearly not a great idea and that it is clearly unsafe. And look what's going on with the USL and the MLB. For the past couple of days, I've been thinking about this whole home market situation and games playing in a home market and without a bubble. And the more I think about it, I actually come up with a couple of kind of ideas and kind of something that is like a devil advocate in terms of why maybe it's not as bad as an idea for these games to play at a home market. And I think the first devil advocate in terms of this is that we basically said the same thing when they announced the tournament was going to happen and the bubble was going to enforce. We saw a lot of doubters and a lot of people on social media that were being kind of like a keyboard warriors and type all the things that talks about how this tournament should be null and void and that the bubble is not going to work. And as soon as we had that outbreak between Dallas and Nashville, everybody was pointing the fingers at that and say, see, told you this was not going to work. Yeah, but then after that incident, we only had one game that was postponed because of players got COVID-19, and even that there was talks the fact that the test was of course being false positive, and it turns out it was being false. The test was false positive, and that from then on we had 0 cases of players tested for COVID-19 for the rest of the tournament when they are in the bubble. Now, I know there's also going to be the counter argument saying that, well, this is the bubble. Of course, we now know that, of course, it works with a bubble, but we don't know exactly if it works when they, of course, play in the home market. Exactly. This is what I've been saying, how I feel like we're just kind of like in the same situation we were when the tournament is announced, where there's a lot of doubters of the fact that things, of course, is not going to work, and that I feel like, once we see how this works and just kind of give it a try to see whether or not if MLS can do a much better job than the USL and the MLB is going to do, then I think maybe that's when we make a fair kind of judgment. And that, again, I just feel like right now there's a lot of people that is going to be overreact about this, and they're going to say this is just a terrible idea, and they're just going to look at the USL and the MLB. Now, the next point I'm going to bring up as a devil advocates is going to talk about those situation and why things have gone bad in the USL and the MLB. And when I look at the USL, so far the reason why it has gone bad isn't because of the fact that every single team has a player tested positive for COVID-19 and that this cases is widespread throughout the league and that most of the games have been postponed, but it's more because there's only a couple of teams that have reports of players getting tested positive, and then it kind of spread out a little bit. And even I heard there's reports of some of those players actually kind of broke the rules of what you're supposed to do during the lockout and what you're not supposed to do during the lockout when games are taking place. And hopefully MLS will pretty much put a stable in terms of the players of what they're supposed to do when this is happening and what they're not supposed to do. And also keep in mind, MLS, all these players has now gone through a life of being in a bubble and being in a controlled environment where they're told to not go out to different places or else they could get in serious trouble. And for most part, most of these players, if not every single player, has get the memo, and hence that's why we haven't had a COVID-19 situation during the bubble. And really, the only players that haven't gone through that is going to be those players in Dallas and in Nashville, which that I think is going to pretty much be another counter argument of people saying, well, those players were clumsy before. You don't know if they're going to be clumsy again of just breaking the rules on stuff. But yeah, I just feel like with some of these devil advocates argument, maybe things are not as bad. But that being said, I'm not going to be just a total optimistic and just kind of just slur out some kind of assumption of these devil advocate statement, because I feel like some of these statements that I made are kind of like assumption with the way that I'm hoping this is going to work out in the end, and I hope the players are not going to be just do what the USL and the MLB is doing, and that is just break the rules and just decide to go out, and then when he come back, there is a high risk that he might have infected the virus to everybody in the team. And I do expect there could be some games that's going to be postponed because of COVID-19, because again, I think this is definitely a very risky move that MLS is going to do, but I feel like right now, for me, I'm going to wait and see how this is going to work out until I make any judgment to it, because I am not going to really fall in the same trap of what many people and many doubters are going to say, where this tournament should be null and void, and that in the end, they're pretty much going to be proven wrong and just going to be proven silent because of that. Now, continue with this after kind of do my little slur of why I feel like this tournament might not be a bad idea. The continuation of the season will feature a comprehensive health and safety protocol, including regular testing of players, coaches, and essential staff for COVID-19. That's nothing new. I mean, they've been doing that in the bubble, so they're going to probably do the same thing again during these games that's playing home market. The revised schedule will see each team will play on additional 18 regular season game in a phase approach. The first phase will consist of most teams playing 6 matches against regional opponent through September 14. The exception to this is FC Dallas and Nashville, because they still have to make up those 3 games that they weren't in the tournament, and that the 3 games I'm talking about is the group stage game, and that those games of course count in the regular season. So both of these teams going to have to make up for it since they weren't there for this tournament. They will play an additional 3 games to make up for those after they were withdrawn from the MLS's back tournament. Due to travel restriction, the US and Canada, Major League Soccer is working with the League Free Canadian Club regarding plans to continue the regular season. More detail on schedule for the Canadian team will be announced in the near future. Now, I have heard the fact that with the situation with what the Free Canadian team, that is Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, they're saying that they're going to play against each other in the first phase. And that, I said before, the reason why they can't really travel to the US and play some of these game is because the Canadian government has a lot of restriction in terms of the players decide to cross the border, and then when they come back they have to self-quarantine themselves for 14 days. And obviously that's not going to work in MLS, where you can't just have a team that goes to the US and come back to Canada and they have to self-quarantine for 14 days and not play a game in 2 weeks. That's just not going to work with how tight our season is going to be. So, right now MLS is really hoping the Canadian government will relax their rule in terms of making some exception of players that go to the US market and then they can come back without having to go through that 14-day quarantine. But obviously, this is not the league decision of whether or not if that's the case. This is going to be up to the Canadian government and see what they are going to do. I mean, the Canadian government, I gotta say, they've been doing a much better job than what the US is trying to respond. Although, to be fair, every single country, you probably can say that they're doing a much better job than what the U.S. is doing, because, the U.S., as we know, it's a mess right now with just political bloodbath in terms of the situation with this COVID-19, and also we still have that ongoing situation with the whole Black Lives Matter and the whole racism kind of thing, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, but it's definitely kind of complicated issue of what we're already dealing with right now in terms of this pandemic that is going on. Let's see. The regular season will culminate on Decision Day on November 8th, and the league aim to release the remaining of the schedule in early September. So then they of course show the schedule by clubs. I already look at the schedule for two of my favorite teams, the Quakes and the Loons. And basically Minnesota is actually playing almost the same opponent that they plays in the MLS is back tournament, because remember in Group D where I said that these kind of games are kind of not only the fact that it's a group of death, but it kind of is like a regional match with all these teams kind of like in a regional area. Well, it seemed like they're going to do the same thing, where I think the Loons are going to be playing the Rapids again, Sporting KC, and RSL again, and then they're going to be playing Dallas and I believe Nashville. Are they playing Nashville this time? Let me double check in terms of the schedule. So for Minnesota, they're playing Sporting KC, Dallas, Houston, RSL, Dallas again, and then Sporting KC. So actually, they don't play the Rapids so far, but I'm assuming they're gonna play the Rapids since they're almost in the same region in terms of how they're gonna do like this regional group. For the Quakes, I know, unfortunately for the Quakes, and this is the thing that I do fear about games playing in a regional basis, the Quakes are going to be really up against it, because unfortunately the Quakes are in a region where basically every single team around our region is very good. So that means that we're going to have some tough schedule, and we start straight off playing against a team that is in the final of the MLS's back tournament against the Portland Timbers. Then we got the Galaxy, then we got LAFC before we play Colorado, Seattle, and LA Galaxy. I mean, I'll be lucky to see us maybe get 2 or 3 wins out of that, and this is not because I'm being pessimistic for the Quakes, but when you look at that schedule, yeah, that is definitely a murderous row of a schedule. And unless if the Quakes can prove me wrong again, like they did in the group stage of this tournament, I just don't know what the Quakes are going to do in terms of this, and whether or not, if they are, like right now, technically they're in a playoff spot right now in 6th place, but we shall see how long that is going to last with them playing all these tough games against these opponents. And if they are able to still make the playoffs at the end of the year, I mean, this has got to be one of the most impressive feat that they've done in the past couple of years of failure, because I know for a fact that the Quakes are going to be playing a lot of Western Conference opponent team that is going to be around their same region, and those teams are really tough to play against, and usually are games that we really need to be our best if we're gonna get all 3 points. Let's see. They talk about Dallas and Nashville. Blah 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 blah. I'm just gonna skim through this. The two teams will face in the first game of the resumption of the 2020 regular season, August 12th at Toyota Stadium in Frisco, and again at the same location on August 16th. Third game of each side will be played in Nashville at a later regular season day. So also, for those of you thinking, am I going to now basically do the preview for the final and include that game between Dallas and Nashville, since they played literally the very next day? And the answer is no. I'm going to separate the preview between that game and the final, because the final itself, I feel like it definitely deserved to have its own video, since it's a final. Like, these two teams have a chance to win a trophy. For one team, they can potentially get their second trophy in franchise history, and for the other team, they can maybe get their first trophy in their franchise history. And a lot of people forget that there's a CCL spot up for grabs in that final too. So it is a very important game, and I feel like that game is definitely more important than what the FC Dallas and Nashville game is going to be, and that it deserved to be with a individual video instead of being combined. But that being said, I will also have to do another individual video for that Dallas versus Nashville game, and that one is going to be tough to do, because I have no idea how both of these teams are going to look, considering they haven't played a single game of meaningful soccer in almost half a year now. So we'll see how that's going to go when I do the preview of that game. The Audi MLS Cup playoffs, a total of 18 clubs will qualify for the postseason, up from 14. So yeah, basically there's going to be a lot of team that is going to qualify for the playoffs. The Audi MLS Cup playoffs will begin on November 20th, culminating with the MLS Cup on December 12th. So yeah, that's a lot of team that will make the playoffs, and I know that's going to drive a lot of people that say that MLS have too many teams in the playoffs. Just even more crazy now, the fact that there's 18 teams out of the 2016 that make the playoffs, and that this feels like something we're dealing with back in the early 2000s when MLS used to have like 8 out of the 10 teams that make to the playoffs and only 2 teams that make it to the playoffs. So that kind of does give me a little bit more hope that the Quakes might make the playoffs, now knowing the fact that a lot of teams are going to make it, and you really need to be at your worst if you're not able to make the playoffs. Although they didn't also tell us exactly the 18 clubs. Is it going to be 9 from the Western Conference and the 9 from the Eastern Conference? I'm assuming that probably is the case. So if that is going to be the case, I think there's only going to be 3 teams that's going to be miss the playoffs in the Western Conference, which, yeah, that is going to be... I'm really hoping the Quakes are not one of those 3 teams, because if they are one of those 3 teams that miss the playoffs, then there's definitely going to be a lot of question we're going to have to ask in the offseason of how you did not make the playoffs, even though we have an expansive kind of playoffs. And by the way, since there's 18 teams that's going to be in the playoffs, I have no idea how the structure is going to look like, and I'm assuming there's going to be teams that's going to have some bye week, because you can't have like 18 teams playing at each other, and that there's going to be kind of like another of these kind of round robin kind of style of play in the playoffs. So I'm guessing maybe they'll announce it a little bit later. Health and safety protocol. You know what? I'm just going to skip that, because that's probably them talk about how we're going to avoid risk of COVID-19 by doing testing every single day. Team travel. Team will be charter flight or buses for the majority of road trip. They will arrive in the host market. Makes sense, because, right now it's definitely a big risk in terms of trying to take for these teams to do a commercial flight. So it makes sense why they decide to charter flights. And there's, the current CBA that we're in right now has already increased charter flights. So, it's not a surprise that MLS decided to take into this. And that, since there's only 9 games that teams have to travel during the regular season, I don't think that's going to be a big issue with the fact that maybe teams have too many charter flight and that they might not be able to afford, and that there's going to be a logistic nightmare between that. Supporter at the time, the majority of matches will play without fans in attendance. MLS club leadership and working local health authority and plan for limited capacity at certain games that were allowed. Now, this is where things is going to be a little bit interesting, and that I know I have heard rumors saying that teams are asking fans if they want to have limited capacity, and that teams have also asked their local health official to see whether or not if they're allowed to do it. For me, I really hope that we don't get into a stage where these teams really are pushing the issue, and that the league is really pushing an issue where they're going to allow fans back in the stadium, mainly because they want that profit out of the match day, because it's definitely unsafe in terms of having fans in the stands, and I'm not going to really make a devil advocate in terms of that. Well, maybe the only devil advocates I might make about that is at least fans are going to be socially distanced when they are in the stands, and I think that's probably the protocol if these teams want to have limited capacity. But still, it is a really big risk if fans are going to go to the stadium to watch these games. And by the way, if the Quakes are going to play these games, I'm going to have a big decision to make if they decide to allow fans to be back in the stands, whether I should attend these games or not, because I will note that if I do attend these games, if the Quakes does allow fans back in the stadium, that I'm taking a big risk in terms of me potentially contracting the virus when I'm at the ground right now. And the good news I will say about that tough decision is that most likely I won't have to make it, because I know the Quakes are not going to be playing with fans anytime soon, and especially with Santa Clara County, as I said before, one of the strictest county in terms of this dealing with this COVID-19. I doubt they're going to let fans back in the stadium anytime soon, and at the earliest, probably in 2021, when the season hopefully is going to resume in a regular manner. Rivalry matches, one of the highlights, blah, 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 blah. You know what? I'm just going to skip the rivalry matches, because we know there's going to be big games like the Hell is Real Derby, the the Texas Derby, the Florida Derby, El Tráfico, and then the Cascadia Derby, so forth and so forth. You can, of course, read a little bit more about that. Where to watch will air. The continuation of the season will air nationally in the U.S. on ESPN, Fox Sport, and Univision platform, also known as Twitter, as well as regional through individual club broadcast partner. All national TV matches not aired by English language network will stream live, unfortunately, on Twitter. Or regional broadcasts will be shown out of market on ESPN Plus in the US. Canadian broadcast schedule will announce at a later date, but I'm assuming these Canadian games is going to be probably broadcast on TSN, also TVR for all of you people that is living in Montreal. So yeah, pretty much it's the same protocol in terms of these broadcast game as we do in the regular season. Some of these games are going to be televised nationally, and most of them probably is going to televise on Sunday or Saturday. And for those games that is not televised nationally, it would just be a local broadcast. And that the good news is, at least now I can watch some MLS game on ESPN Plus, and that I don't have to deal with the nightmare and the headache in terms of have to watch some of these games on kind of an illegal stream because of the fact that unfortunately I don't have ESPN, and when games are playing on Twitter, I refuse to watch them because you already know my rant that I had with watching games on Twitter after this tournament, and I don't expect to change my mind once the regular season is going to resume and that these game is going to be taking place on Twitter. But that being said, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this announcement? And to kind of quickly summarize this announcement, MLS decided to play games in their home market. They announced their first 6 game of the season, and basically this is going to be, I think this is probably kind of like a trial run of what MLS is doing, where if this of course work out, they will continue the season. But if it doesn't work out, then maybe they're going to pull the plug and see how it's going to go. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this? And as always, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.